Welcome to this tutorial on Adobe Lightroom Classic. We are working in the Develop module, developing our raw photos. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover the basics panel and how to set the tonal range and create contrast in your raw photo. So to get started, up here at the top, we need to start to understand what this histogram is. So this histogram is a graph, and all of these spikes are all of the pixels in our picture. And to the left, all the way to the left, very left, is pure black. And then the whole tonal range all the way to the right is pure white. And then how many, and then there's blacks right here. These are the blacks in our tonal range, the shadows in our tonal range, the midtones, the highlights, and the whites. So anything here in the blacks and the shadows are going to be these dark colors. Anything here in the highlights are going to be like her skin, probably her dress, right? What we're wanting to do with this is we're going to typically try to get our photos to have a pure black. And you can see this one doesn't have a pure white. So we're going to set the pure black point and the pure white point and stretch our tonal range out a little bit. In addition, if you look down here at these basic sliders, we have highlights, shadows, white, and blacks. And if I roll over them, look up here at the histogram. As I roll over highlights, it shows you which section of the histogram highlights is adjusting. Shadows, whites, and blacks. You might look at this and figure, well, I should start at the top with exposure or contrast. You would be wrong. I don't know why Adobe puts those at the top. Don't start there. We want to set our black point first and then our white point second. So we have our blacks. We can, that's how I like to do it. I like to hold Option and I'm going to slide it. All right. And typically blacks go to the left. Typically. And how far to the left depends on the image. So this image already has a pure black point. So I'm not going to go too far. As I start to slide to the left, you will see that the white starts to change to yellow and black. That means I'm losing detail in the shadows in those particular areas. So I'm just going to pull that back a little bit to like 10. I don't mind clipping a little detail in the shadows. I actually like to push it a little bit so that there's a little yellow, a little bit of black. I'm going to let go. And all that did on our histogram was it pushed it a little to the left. Not super necessary on this one because we did have from her collar a pure black. We can reset this. I can double click on the eyedrop or the little teardrop, resets it back to 0. We can see what Adobe thinks it should be. I'm going to hold Shift. I'm going to double click on the drop and it thinks it should be -17. I'm fine with that. I think I had mine at -10. I can bring it down a little bit. Now we're going to set whites. Blacks are usually to the left. Whites usually to the right. Option key. I'm going to drag this to the right. You can see I'm pitch black on my image. I'm going to drag until I start to see some specks like that. That means I'm blowing out the highlights. I'm losing detail in the highlights. That's okay in the blacks. In the whites, not so much. So let's bring that back. Something like that. So my blacks are currently -15 to the left and my whites +28. Don't worry about these numbers. Every photo is different. Just keep in mind that typically blacks to the left, whites to the right. Once I get these set up, now we want to start to look at the shadows and the highlights and bring detail back into those. So I'm going to come up to the highlights. Highlights is the one slider in all of this basics menu that I don't mind pushing all the way. And typically like almost always, it's going to go to the left. And again, highlights are going to be in this particular one on her face, and I can zoom in to see that area so you can see it better. All the way to the left, you can see now we are getting her kind of natural skin tone back. Again, highlights is the one that I'm perfectly fine with going all the way to the left. This is double click back to 0. You can see we lost some detail. We're a little overexposed on her skin. I push it, I'm seeing detail back. So maybe I'll drop it down just a little bit, -90. If highlights went to the left, I'll give you one guess on where shadows should go. Shadows are going to the right. I'm zoomed in, I have my little hand. I also have the navigator over here. I can come down and look at this shadow area. So that now when I'm adjusting the shadows, I'm going to pay attention here. You can push shadows all the way to the right and brighten that up, but then we don't have much contrast. So let me click to zoom out. Double click to make that go back. We have contrast right now. Brightness, darkness. If I push that all the way, it's all bright. There's not too much darkness. Doesn't look good. What I typically find is I typically put shadows at half or less of the highlights. But every image is different. So I'm going to push this a little bit. I'm paying attention to here, and I like it at about 40, which is almost half of 90. So what we've done is we've given our image an absolute white point. We pushed our absolute black a little bit, and we've kind of stretched our tonal range out so that we have more contrast in our image with a pure black and a pure white point. Before, after. Before, after. I can also, and that's using the backslash key on the keyboard. I can also do the Y key, do the side by side, before, after. You can really tell in her skin tone the difference, right? And then also the color of her dress and just that bigger contrast range. We have a better looking photo. The key here is not to get too carried away, not to drag them and make very crazy changes, but it's to correct your exposure, set a good tonal range, create good contrast, and season to taste. You're the artist.